I'd like to call the Garden Grove City Council meeting to order. As per the agenda, there are 4 closed session items, so I'll open oral communications here. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on any of those 4? Seeing none, I'll close oral communication and we'll recess to closed session.
We'll now call the meeting for the Garden Grove Housing Authority. Madam Clerk, please take row.
Commissioner Dalton?
Here.
Commissioner Doe?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Navarez?
Here.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Here.
Vice Chair Broadwater?
Here.
Chair Wynn?
Here. Do we have any oral communications? Thank you. We'll now go to the consent items. Do we have a motion?
Move the balance. Second.
Call for the vote.
Motion received, 7 yes votes.
We have no public hearings or item for consideration. Any matters from commissioners or director? Okay, hearing none. I just want to announce that Marianne Hamamura is retiring from the city after many years of service, dedicated service. And this is her last meeting, so we want to wish her well. And I heard that your retirement dinner is February 11th. So if anybody wants to attend, you can contact the clerk or the city secretary. We'll now call for the adjournment of the Housing Authority, and the next regular meeting of Housing Authority will be held on Thursday, February 23rd, 2010 at 6:30 p.m. in the council chamber.
It's all up to you. I'm not doing nothing.
Councilmember Broadwater?
Here.
Councilmember Doe?
Here.
Councilmember Wynn?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jones?
Here.
Mayor Dalton?
Here. Prior to this council meeting, we had 4 closed session items, and reporting back, there's no reportable action taken. We'll have the invocation by Keith Jones, Public Works Director, and the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Doe.
make this special presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Vertal. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, tonight the Garden Grove City Council is proud to recognize the central figure of the Argonaut football family, whose direction and guidance led to a memorable season that inspired the community. Will Coach Joe Hay please come to the podium?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All it took was one season to go from Mr. Hay, health educator, to Coach Hay, Orange County's Coach of the Year. In his inaugural season as head football coach at Garden Grove High School, Coach Hay led his team to the CIF Southern Section Division title game held this past December. It was only the second time in the school's 87-year history that the program had gone that far in the playoffs. As with any legendary saga, Coach Hay did not lead his team to triumph without tragedy. Their team practices began while their CIF linebacker was away at boot camp for the summer. Then after the season opener, the team forever lost a dedicated player and outstanding young man, Kevin Tellis. Like a true general, Joe rallied his troops and led his players over this mountain of adversity. In the following weeks, Coach Hay led his team to a 13-straight victory winning streak. The cheers from their wins echoed throughout the city and led to an unprecedented support from the community. He stands proud of his players' resiliency and willingness to continue on after the devastating loss of their brother. Coach Hay's 14 years of experience in leadership are a testament to his strength and character. Rarely does a high school football coach have to overcome the adversity he and his team endured. It was a demonstration of his commitment to his players, the program, and to the Garden Grove community. These efforts led to his being awarded the Orange County Register's Orange County Coach of the Year and the KBC Channel 7 NFL High School Coach of the Week and later Coach of the Year, for which $2,500 has been donated to the school's football program. Just as Coach Hay was mentored by coaches Don Rowe and Ray Shackelford from Golden West College, he also believes in helping youth succeed beyond the playing field. Off the field, Joe is a health education teacher at Garden Grove High. He spent 10 years teaching at Hare School before joining the Argonaut family. For 15 years, he lived in Garden Grove and still has family ties to the city. Without the support of his own family, including his wife Nicole, dog Bronco, and cat Jackson, much of what he faced this football season could have been far too overwhelming. Joe Hay set a first-class example by comforting the souls of a grieving team, leading them to victory, and inspiring hope in a community. It's a fitting honor for him to be chosen as KABC's Channel 7's NFL High School Coach of the Year. At this time, the Mayor and City Council would like to present Joe Hay with a certificate of recognition and a memento. The city is proud to have such a dedicated coach, mentor, and role model making such a difference in the lives of our students.
You know, there are a couple of things I just want to say. You know, Coach Hay, and I was there when he got the Channel 7 award, and in talking to people, you know, he teaches football players to be men, not men to be football players. You know, and the gravy that goes along with it, if you're successful, you've achieved all those things. But he's not concerned 100% about the football without being 100% concerned about academics and other things. And I know that he had set up classes, makeup classes, and done an awful lot above and beyond the call for the young people at Garden Grove High School. And we're proud of you, and God bless you.
It's a Garden Grove side.
If you turn around, take your picture, and then you're free to use the podium and...
I need one more.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to say on the behalf of Garden Grove High School football program and Garden Grove High School, thank you very much to the City Council for awarding me and recognizing me. I would also like to thank Dr. Colleen Cross, our principal, who's here tonight as my moral support. For being here with us, and I just wanted to say thank you. And you know, Coach of the Year and Coach of the Week and all that stuff means an awful lot to me. But you know, you have to recognize the student athletes that were under me were a very big part of our victory. So I wanted to recognize them as well as our boosters, the community, the student body, our administrators, our teachers on campus. It was just a great year for Garden Grove High School football, and I think it's a great year for Garden Grove High School itself. So I thank you very much. I'm very honored.
Thank you, Coach. Okay, I'd like to open oral communications for the council and the agency and the sanitary district. Gail Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm pleased to be here again. I've been here, I was here for sure last year and I think the year before. I am Gail Taylor, and I'm here about the Cypress College Americana Awards, which will be held on February 20. It's our 35th annual event where we honor outstanding citizens from the communities we serve, and of course that includes Garden Grove. Before I go on, I want to thank you for your years of support and tell you that this year we have just about 1,000 students from Garden Grove who attend Cypress College. And we have 17,000 students altogether. Enrollment is as high as it has ever been. We're doing a lot more with a lot less, as all of you know. We're all doing that right now. We're at 105% fill rate. Anyway, back to Americana. It is Saturday the 20th at 5:30. I know you have been there, and you were kind enough to come last year, Mayor Dalton, and we appreciated that you came with your honorees last year, Jay and Eleanor Mastriani, longtime Garden Grove people. And this year, our Citizens of the Year are Lon and Linda Cahill, and I know those are names that are familiar to you because they're active, and of course, Lon was your fire chief, and Linda was in your HR department for many, many years. And our man of the year this year is Mr. Americana himself, Tommy Lasorda. What's more Americana than baseball, right? So that'll be a lot of fun. And just a side note, when I interviewed him last week, he said, well, how long do I get to speak? And I said, 5 minutes. And he said, well, you better add an O onto that. I hope that doesn't keep you away. But whoever has heard him says that he's marvelous and very entertaining, and he's certainly very deserving, not because of his, well, not only because of his baseball career, but because he does a lot in the community. He speaks to many, many service clubs. He's been to West Point and Annapolis, and what's the other one? Anyway, he talks to our men and women in uniform, and Colorado Springs, that's right. The Air Force, is it that Air Force? Okay, thank you. Proceeds from Americana go directly to our students in the form of scholarships, grants, book loans. They also help faculty with faculty grants. We hope we can count on you to support us again this year. And let me mention our committee members from Garden Grove: Harry Krebs, Mallory Vega, Tom England, Les Jones, Catherine Barr, and Ruth Smith, a name that I know is familiar. We are, okay, any questions about Americana? Does anybody have anything to ask? Okay. I have an invitation for you. I've given them to Kathy already. And here is an end-of-the-year report, which I've also given to Kathy for each of you. And just in case you haven't heard this, Cypress College and the Garden Grove Chamber are hosting a Lunch and Learn with Rob and Noah on the 16th of February. And I'll leave this, too, in case you need information on this. I thank you very much. Hope to see you at Americana on February 20th.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bernard Dagarin.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Raining evening it is. I'm from West Garden Grove, and I'd like to urge you to turn the efforts for the Vietnam War Memorial Museum over to private enterprise, private citizens, to make sure that I'm not just a grouchy old grandpa, which some of my family call me. I went out and canvassed my neighborhood, my friends, all within Garden Grove, and my family, and I talked to about 45 people, and except for 3 or 4 who wouldn't give me a vote one way or the other, and that's kind of appalling. They were all in favor of doing this on private funds. That is, turning the feasibility study over to a voluntary committee and funding that with private funds, and also doing this, if the feasibility study proves feasible, then build the museum on private funds. Angels, business, and private citizens who are interested in doing that. And they felt that, and I asked them some questions in addition to it, they felt that way about any museum, whether it be a war memorial museum for any of the wars. And I'm a Korean War vet, and I feel the same way. So, and I asked, what do you want to do with the funds? And he said, fix Lamson and Valley View. About 6 of them said, why do we have that big Fig Alert sign there? Couldn't we have spent that money on fixing Valley View? And in my neck of the woods, those 2 streets really need fixed. So thank you very much for listening to me, and drive home safely.
Thank you. Peggy Bergen. Oops, thank you.
Happy New Year to all of you. I haven't been here because I've had a family issue that I was out of town, so I missed one of your meetings. But anyways, I picked up the paper today and was reading it, and the first thing, the article about Garden Grove had to do with our museum, which basically when I looked over the agenda over the weekend, I thought, oh, maybe I won't even go, because basically speaking, all they're going to be doing is seeing the feasibility of it. But my question is, I was at a meeting a few months ago, and there was an issue came up that it turns out that anything under a certain amount of money, I believe it was $25,000. It may have been as high as $50,000. That Mr. Fertel, the city manager, can just go ahead with that without ever having to address the city council on that issue. So I'm kind of wondering how come they're bringing up the idea of him okaying you needing to okay the feasibility of doing this study, or because he has already the authority to do it without any of your input. But that's one of the things I had to discuss. But in the closed session today, you were talking about buying 2 pieces of property that have to do with the Trask and Fairview widening and traffic plan. And then also in one of the items for consideration was another property on Fairview itself, which I'm pretty sure I know the property. It's a very large piece of property with a very small house on it. But one of the things I want to make sure when these are purchased, that all of the houses, especially the one on Fairview, which was built in 1952, that they all have an adequate asbestos analysis before any destruction is done. Because most of the houses in Garden Grove were built before the guidelines were as strict as they have been the last few years. And asbestos is very deadly, I know that. But my other question about that whole project, I know it's coming from a federal grant. I was at the meeting that was discussed. But at this point in time, I don't really see the necessity of doing it anyways, because our street, our Fairview on the west side, funnels into Santa Ana's. So we widen ours into 3 lanes, and they still have 2. So you're still funneling a lot of traffic into less traffic. And also, the traffic issue most of the time is coming towards the freeway, not away from the freeway. Coming towards the freeway in the morning and the evening, you're stopped from the freeway entrance all the way back to First Street in Santa Ana. So widening it a block and a half there is not really going to make a whole lot of difference, other than it will create a lot of traffic issues. And the grant was for roughly $790,000, I believe, and the purchase of this one single piece of property is going to be $534,000. So I'm trying to see how the government grant is really going to cover much of what we won't have to cover ourselves to do this. So that's my thing on the Fairview property. And also there was an item in the agency today, consideration of buying some project on Tamerlane. I didn't write down the number. I'm very sorry. Are we buying this property on Tamerlane, or are we just participating in the rehabilitation? I believe you discussed that project before, and it was going to be a private property, and we were just working with them. But from looking at that, it looks like we are going to be buying the properties now. And it just seems we keep buying more property, and I'm not quite sure exactly why, because I also heard in the 4 o'clock news, LA is just letting go, firing, or whatever what the polite term is for letting go of staff members, 100 staff members today. They cannot, they can't relocate them, they don't have the money to, because they're in danger of going bankrupt. And we're a lot smaller than LA. I think we should just watch our P's and Q's and save every cent we can to see what happens the next year or so. And okay, and my other question was, on the 18th of January, which would have been a week ago Monday, I went up to a meeting at St. Callistus Church, and Father came over to me because he's seen me on these meetings, which a lot of people have, and he wanted to ask what the situation was. He called at roughly 5 o'clock for some woman that was being very obstreperous, whatever, being obnoxious, and somewhat hostile. He called for police intervention, and it wasn't until after 7:45 that he got a response over the phone to see if the situation had disappeared. Now, he wasn't about to go over and, physically do anything, because he had no idea what the situation with the woman was, but she went from outside his church into the 5:30 church service, disrupted the mass, and no police presence came. And then he called roughly about 2 hours later, and they said, well, if you have a problem before, call 911. Okay. But then he said he was also called once before by the police, or sent a notice that they were calling too often for 911 calls. So he says, I can't call every time I think someone's a little bit out of line, because then they send me notices that, you're using up too much of our time. So
Okay,
he kind of wants to know.
Thank
you very
Peggy.
much.
Okay. Peter Katz.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to speak tonight in favor of the Vietnam War Museum. There are museums in some form or another dedicated to some aspect of the war in Washington, D.C., New York City, Hollandale, New Jersey, the Imperial Citadel in Hue, Vietnam, West Point, New York, Frihaus, France, and Australia, as well as the Texas University Vietnam Project. But none have our demographics and our immigrant experience. A shared past binds people of a community together, even when distance and different circumstances and experience create diverse interests. Social identity is ever rooted in history. Stories need to be told because history is ever changing, and how soon we forget the past. As a historian, let me share some of the facts with you. 58,000 American deaths in Vietnam, 153,000 serious wounded, but 1 million Vietnamese combatants killed, 4 million civilian Vietnamese killed, 312,000 Koreans fought alongside the Americans and the Vietnamese, and a large portion of them live here in Garden Grove. They were the largest force helping us in that war. 47,000 Australians. There were 2 hospitals at the start of the war. At the end, there were 30. Beds went from 100 to 5,000. We put 16,000 doctors and 15,000 nurses in Vietnam over a 30-year period. We need to tell their stories. In 1966, we lost 455 aircraft. In 1967, 649 aircraft. In this Operation Rolling Thunder, we lost more planes than the entire World War II war against the Japanese. Our children need to understand the difficulty of this war and the adversity of the people that fought it and came to this country to become the new generation of Americans. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was 12,500 miles long, snaking through Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. 3,000 miles of pipeline, moved 20,000 tons of supplies. The Brown Water Navy, which John Kerry was a part of in the Mekong Delta, which was the Rice Bowl of Vietnam. Another American presidential candidate, John McCain, was one of 660 prisoners of war. Operation Linebacker in the Easter offensive and the Christmas bombing, Operation Linebacker 2 killed many civilians. 20,000 anti-American demonstrators were including Angela Davis and John Lennon trying to end this war. Angela Davis is currently the president, I believe, still of Berkeley University. The Tet Offensive, My Lai, the tunnels, the Paris peace talks, Khe Sanh, so many stories to tell. We build a museum as a bridge to understanding. Cesar Chavez once said that the greatest gift an education can give you is its ability to pass on what you have learned. Museums teach those that have not experienced what we have experienced, the brutality and the horrors of war, the joys and difficulties of peace, the trials and tribulations of immigration, and the untold suffrage of the boat people. We must show how an immigrant transforms an alien place into a home, becoming deeply rooted in a land that once was foreign, even despised. February is Black History Month, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once referred to the immigrant experience as an American story of inevitable progress, what he called the arc of justice. The Johnson-Reed Act of 1924 favored northern white Europeans for immigration, and only 5% of the U.S. population were immigrants. The 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act changed that forever. Today, 10% of our population are immigrants, and they are still unfolding. How do you define an African American today? Today, 1 in 10 African Americans are foreign born. Some have never been to Africa, including 900,000 from the Caribbean. The DuSable Museum of African American History in Chicago now hosts a Nigerian festival every year, and it is sponsored by the city of Chicago. The changing demands of global capitalism and its appetite for labor make us search for new ways to educate and generate revenue. This is one of those opportunities. And axiom of business is, in order to make money, you must spend money. A feasibility study will teach us what works and what doesn't. A nonprofit organization such as a community foundation can account for all the funds raised and spent. The city would be reimbursed for all expenditures if done right, and federal monies may be available. I urge
Peter,
this
would you wrap it
council
up, please?
that the Vietnam veterans, Vietnamese and American, the civilians and boat people, and the anti-war protesters to come together and do the right thing. Support this community effort. It's worthwhile.
Thank you. Charles Mitchell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff. And looking over the agenda, I noticed that one item, 6H, under items for consideration, was about the restructuring of how the city council conducted business. As I recall, a couple of months ago, there was discussion about changing the amount of time people were allowed to speak before the council from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. And I'm wondering if this restructuring of council procedures is including any reference to the amount of time allotted to speakers before the council. On another item, what is the value of a human life? What is the value of 1 million human lives, or 10 million? Now, it's difficult to understand from the perspective of a young person in grade school, for instance, what has happened in our history. As a matter of fact, 4 names stand out in world history. Adolf Hitler, Chancellor of Germany, who was a dictator and was responsible for killing at least 6 million and probably up to 15 million people. Tojo was the war minister of Japan and was responsible for carrying out the plans for the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Mussolini was the dictator of Italy and waged a war against primitive culture in Eastern Africa, as well as cooperating with Adolf Hitler in the massacre of millions of people. Joseph Stalin, dictator of Russia, through his purges, killed millions of his own country people. The irony of all of this is that if you ask these same children today, they will answer, and it has been recorded, that if you ask them who Adolf Hitler was, the response was, oh, he helped us win World War II. They ask who Mussolini was. Oh, he ran an Italian restaurant. They ask who Tojo was. Well, doesn't he make those big screen TVs? And they ask who Stalin was. They have no idea. They never heard of him. That's why it's important for history to be taught and what has occurred in our history, including our problems that we dealt with and finally walked away from in Vietnam. Unfortunately, that was a situation where we lost so many lives, and it still turned into a communist dictatorship. Now, I am totally in favor of the project of putting together a museum to teach our kids the history of what happened. But I am concerned, if this is just an exploratory committee, why isn't it just the 2 people who suggested it, Councilman Broadwater, Councilwoman Wynn, and a few selected individuals to get together as a committee to look into this? Why does the city have to put up $20,000 to $25,000? I can't come up with an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Win Hung.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and City Council and everybody else. First of all, just to remind you, and deadline for State Parade on the Bush Avenue on February 1st. I am a member of our organization. Secondly, I want to speaking up of the support for the Garden Grove Vietnam War Memorial. Westminster already have a Vietnam War Memorial, and Washington D.C. we already have a memorial war. And I think that people already speak it up. We just remember our hero. I am a former Vietnamese Army Ranger. I was wounded in the war. And I have two brothers killed in the Vietnam War. My uncle is a disabled veteran. And I have my advisor, U.S. Army Ranger, died on my hand. So this memorial we show for the next generation what the wonderful, the parent, the father, mother is supported for the history of the freedom fighting. So if you need any help, even money, fundraising, I'm volunteer to do work with you guys. And I will donate a beautiful picture, about 40 by 60 sign of Vietnam, at the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. That are my souvenir from chapter 47 in the Riverside. They donate me for a long time, but that is very, very beautiful souvenir. I will donate to this Garden Grove Vietnam War Memorial. And I have some, the military item from Vietnam original, and I bought from eBay. I will donate that one too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close oral communications, and we'll go to the agency.
Ms. Baylor, please show that all members of the agency are here. We've got oral communications. We have no consent items and no public hearings. We have 2 items for consideration. No, we have 1 item for consideration.
Yeah. Actually, Mr. Chairman, the developer has requested that this item be postponed until the next agency meeting.
Okay. And in matters from agency members, do we have any matters? At this time, we'll adjourn until, what, February 9th?
We'll now go to the Garden Grove Sanitary District. Let the record show that all members are present. Okay, consent items.
Mr. President, it's recommended that items 2A through 2D be acted on simultaneously unless a separate discussion or action is requested by a board member.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, there are no other items. Any matters from board members? Okay, hearing none, the next regular meeting of the Sanitary District will be held on Tuesday, February 23rd, in this building at 6:30 p.m. Okay, we will reconvene the City Council meeting and go to consent items.
Mr. Mayor, it's recommended that items 6A through 6N be acted on simultaneously unless a separate discussion or action is requested by a council member.
Move to balance.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, we'll go to public hearings.
Mr. Mayor, your first public hearing is 7A. It's considered protests on the fall 2009 weed abatement invoices, and Sabrina Soltis is here to give us a brief staff report on this item.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, twice a year the Fire Department initiates the city's weed abatement program, and there are 3 steps. The first is the Council's declaration of a public nuisance. The second is a public hearing after the notices are sent to the property owners to clear their lots. And the third is the reason we're here tonight, a public hearing after the lots are cleared and invoices are unpaid by property owners. It is recommended that Council receive testimony from members of the public and take appropriate action. Those actions would be upholding any objections and directing staff as to how the Council would like to respond, overrule the objections and direct staff to proceed with the weed abatement process, and if no objections, direct staff to proceed with the weed abatement process.
Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll open a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments, questions, motions?
Move to issue.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
7B.
Mr. Mayor, 7B is a public hearing to consider a request for a 2-year time extension on a development agreement. And Aaron Webb is here to give a brief staff report on this item.
Mayor Dalton and members of the City Council, item number 7B is a request for a time extension for a project to construct 12 semi-detached residences and then subdivide them into condos. It's located on the southeast corner of Stanford Avenue and Adele. The project was approved in 2005 through a development agreement that also included the entitlement, site plan, variance, and tentative tract map. The development agreement and all the land use entitlements had a 4-year expiration date that ended November 11, 2009. The tentative tract map received the automatic 2-year time extension through the passage of Assembly Bill number AB 333. The Governor of California signed that bill to allow all tentative maps valid as of July 15, 2009, an automatic 2-year time extension. The applicant has requested a time extension based on the current market conditions and the scarcity of funds from lending institutions. By amending the development agreement to extend the expiration date for 2 years, the site plan and variance will be consistent with the tentative tract map and have a single expiration date of November 11, 2011. The Planning Commission heard the request on December 3rd, 2009, and recommends that the City Council introduce the attached ordinance approving the development agreement.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll open a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this matter? Okay, come forward and state your name, please.
My name is Gail Eastman, and I'm here on behalf of the developer to thank you for hearing their request. Thank your staff, Aaron, of your planning staff has been wonderful in working with them to work through all the difficulty of bringing this before you. We are wanting to move this forward as soon as possible. However, I'm sure all of you are aware of market conditions and how tough financing is in these recent months, weeks that we're in. So we're working on that. We plan to, the developer had hoped to break ground yet this year. And if we can gather the finances together this year, we will. However, we're working on that as diligently as we can. So if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
Okay, no question. Would you please fill out a card, though, and leave it with the clerk before you leave?
I did.
Oh, okay.
That's your other card up there.
This one here? No. Oh, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yes, she did do one, and I didn't see it. Okay. Anyone else like to speak on this matter? Okay, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, before a motion is made, I'll need to read the title.
Okay.
If there's
Any questions? Any comments? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it'd be ordinance for introduction and first reading. Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove adopting a revised development agreement between Torah Number 3 LP and the City of Garden Grove for property located on the southeast corner of Stanford Avenue and Adele Street at 8642 Stanford Avenue, Garden Grove, parcel number 133-463-11.
Move the item. Second.
Okay, motion is second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, 7C.
Mr. Mayor, 7C is an amendment to the Garden Grove Municipal Code, amending definitions related to group homes, and Maria Parra is here to give a staff report on this item.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Before you tonight is a request to transmit a recommendation of the Planning Commission recommending adoption of a negative declaration and approval of amendment number A-15109, amending the definitions and uses relating to group homes, boarding lodging facilities, and child daycare centers of Title IX of the Municipal Code. In 2008, a group home subcommittee of the Neighborhood Improvement Committee was formed to study group home issues affecting the community and to develop an action plan designed to respond to the community issues. As part of the action plan, staff reviewed the current definitions of group homes, boarding lodging facilities, and child daycare facilities, and determined that the definitions were not consistent with the definitions found in the California Health and Safety Code and required updating. A City Council study session was held in September 2009 to present the subcommittee's action plan, which also included a draft copy of the proposed amendment. On November 19, 2009, the Garden Grove Planning Commission recommended adoption of the negative declaration and approval of amendment number A-15109 to the City Council with a 7-0 vote. The proposed amendment will amend the existing definitions for boarding lodging facilities, congregate care facilities, child daycare centers, convalescent centers, convalescent homes, foster homes, and family daycare, and will also introduce new definitions for intermediate care facility, halfway homes, residential care facility for the elderly, single housekeeping unit, and skilled nursing facility. The proposed amendment is intended to provide consistency with the definitions found in the California Health and Safety Code and will not change the existing definitions of the existing zoning designations of these uses. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt the negative declaration and introduce the attached ordinance for first reading, approving amendment number A-15109. This concludes staff presentation, and I can answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I really don't have any more cards up here, so if there's anyone that would like to speak on this matter. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Gentleman and lady.
Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment, and then I'll make a motion following, just to commend Lieutenant Whitman and everybody on staff who's gotten involved around this issue, for doing a great job of diving in and kind of getting to the core of it and figuring out the complexities and difficulties with regard to regulating any kind of group home issues. And so just want to commend you on your approach and kind of the direction that you've taken it to really get our hands around it and identify what we have, where we have, and start to just track it in a way that gets us to at least a more cognitive step of understanding how these work and how we can regulate them and make sure that there's no impacts on neighborhoods. So with that being said, I'll move the issue.
You have to read the ordinance before.
Yeah, before the vote.
Yeah.
It's ordinance for introduction and first reading by title. Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove adopting a negative declaration and approving amendment number A-151-09, an amendment to Title IX of the Garden Grove Municipal Code relating to group homes, boarding, lodging facilities, and child daycare facilities.
Thank you. Okay, you have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and let's try to keep it to 5 minutes so we can get through. There are a few other things, and there may be some discussions on. So, okay. And on to the next item.
Mr. Mayor, it's 7D. It's a public hearing to consider an amendment to Title IX of the Garden Grove Municipal Code regarding landscape water efficiency requirements. Aaron Webb is here to give a staff report on this item.
Mayor and council members, item number 7D is in fact an amendment of Title IX to incorporate landscape water efficient requirements. The state legislature has expanded water conservation requirements due to natural and regulatory droughts. So to conserve water, the legislature has enacted AB 1881, which requires local agencies to adopt the state model water efficient landscape ordinance or a local water efficient landscape ordinance that is at least as effective as the state model. So the state model requires that applicants submit a documentation package of landscape water efficiency for certain new landscaping and landscaping rehabilitation projects. It also requires that water use is reduced to no more than 70% of the project if it were planted entirely with turf. A local model alternative water efficient landscape ordinance, we'll call it the county-wide model ordinance, has been developed by the Orange County Division of the League of Cities and the Municipal Water District of Orange County, MoDOC, with support from the Orange County chapter of Building Industry Association. The county-wide model ordinance is intended to promote local control and focus landscape water efficiency objectives. So the advantages are that the certification by a landscape professional of the landscape water efficiency provisions reduces the need for city resources and fees to perform the function. The extensive technical details from the state model ordinance are split into a separate guidelines document that can be adopted by the City Council by resolution and attached to Title IX. The countywide ordinance is also tailored to local conditions. The countywide model ordinance provisions for landscape water efficiency are proposed to be integrated into and made part of Title IX. So we have placed them in the newly reorganized Title IX in the single-family residential section, the multifamily residential, and that commercial, office, professional, industrial, and open space. Projects that are subject to the landscape water efficiency provisions and must submit the landscape documentation package are: 1, projects of 2,500 square feet of landscape area that are developer-installed, public agency, or private development. Projects of 5,000 square feet of landscape area that are homeowner-provided or homeowner-hired projects. And then rehabilitation of landscape areas, but only for the developer-installed, public agency, or private development projects that are at least 2,500 square feet, are 50% of the total landscape area, and all modifications are to occur within 1 year. The Planning Commission considered the proposed amendment at their public hearing held on December 3rd, 2009, and they recommended that the Council conduct a public hearing, adopt the attached resolution approving the landscape water efficiency guidelines, and introduce the attached ordinance approving amendment number A-15209 to add landscape water efficiency provisions as found in Exhibit A. And I will read the top of the ordinance. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove approving Code Amendment number A-15209 to incorporate landscape water efficiency requirements into Title IX zoning ordinance reorganized October 2009 of the Municipal Code.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I'll open a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Yes.
I'm on the board of directors of the League of California Cities, and I know they're very proud that they have authored this thing and passed it around. And my understanding is that it's been very well received by all the other cities around the county, and we're probably around one of the last cities actually to adopt this. But it just kind of goes back, and the vision of League of California Cities, if you boil it down in a nutshell, is that if in doubt, should be local control prevails on issues. And this is just an example of that, just trying to put the governing authority back in the local municipalities' hands as opposed to the state sort of handing down mandates on what we can and can't do all the time. So I think League of Cities is a great group. They serve our interests well, and this is one example of that they came up with, and now a lot of cities, actually I think all the cities are going to end up adopting this. So I'd like to move approval on it.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Member Brownwater didn't take it. Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, items for consideration.
Mr. Mayor, 9A is acquisition of real property
Wait,
located.
did we do D2 also? There was a D1 and a D2.
Yeah, one action
Yeah.
for both.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
thank you. This is acquisition of real property located at 13531 Fairview Street, and it's a street widening project. And Carlos is here to give you a staff report on this item.
Real quick, before we start, I'm not going to participate on this item because this property is somehow involved in a project that Brandywine Homes is doing. So just to avoid any appearance of impropriety, I'm not going to participate.
Okay.
Mayor Dalton, members of the council, it's requested that the city council consider the acquisition of real property located at 13531 Fairview Street, owned by Shirley Gray, for the widening of Fairview Streets. The Fairview Trask intersection project is designed to widen the westerly side of Fairview Street, extending north from Avalon Avenue to Ranchero Way, and the subject property is part of the project. and due to the proximity of the existing single-family residence to the proposed street improvements, the acquisition of the entire parcel is required. An agreement has been reached with the owner for the property. An agreed-upon purchase price of $534,600 has been determined to be at fair market value by an independent appraiser. The property contains 19,800 square feet of land and is improved with an 800 square foot single-family residence. The property is being sold in as-is condition at the close of escrow. However, environmental testing of the subject property will be conducted prior to the close of escrow to disclose the presence of any hazardous materials. The city retains the option of terminating the agreement if hazardous materials are identified. The subject property is occupied by a tenant subject to a month-to-month lease, which can be terminated with 30-day written notice, and the owner is not eligible for relocation assistance. The street improvement project is funded by Measure M funds, which have been set aside for the acquisition of this property. Based on the foregoing, staff recommends the council approve the following. 1, approve the acquisition of the subject property. 2, authorize the city manager to execute the purchase agreement and make minor modifications as needed on behalf of the city. 3, authorize the city clerk to accept the grant deed on behalf of the city. 4, authorize the finance director to draw a warrant in the amount of $534,600 for the property acquisition. 5, authorize the city manager to execute the agreements for asbestos testing, asbestos abatement, and demolition at the lowest responsible bids. And 6, authorize staff to provide relocation assistance to the tenant in possession per California relocation law when appropriate to do so. That concludes staff report.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, any comments?
Move the issue.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 4 yes votes.
Okay, would someone bring Councilman Jones back?
Here he is.
Okay, we'll then go to 9B.
Mr. Mayor, 9B is a formation of a Vietnam War Museum Ad Hoc Exploratory Committee, and Kim Hoy is here to give a staff report on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. On December 8th of last year, the Council authorized Council members Broadwater and Wynn to work with staff to examine the costs and parameters of a feasibility study to bring a Vietnam War Museum to Garden Grove and to return to the City Council with a recommendation. Since that meeting, staff has met with several consultants to discuss the type of study that would be required to objectively consider the feasibility of the proposed Vietnam War Museum. Prior to conducting a detailed development and operations study, it was recommended to staff that a feasibility study be conducted to examine the scope and development, including such things as a conceptual design, a site analysis, and management of facility operations and costs. Additionally, the study would project attendance, revenues, and the expenses associated with the establishment of a museum. Following the feasibility study, results would be presented to determine the need for further analysis. Preliminary estimates for a study of this nature are estimated to cost between $20,000 to $25,000, and at present there are sufficient funds within the City Council's contingency package to pay for such a study. In addition to an examination of the development, it was suggested that an exploratory committee be established to define the scope of the development of such a museum. It is staff's recommendation that the committee consist of 2 council members and 3 others who have the expertise to assist in defining the scope of development for the feasibility study. Tonight, staff is recommending that the City Council approve the following actions. 1, to appoint members to an ad hoc exploratory committee, and 2, to authorize the city manager to enter into a consultant agreement to conduct a feasibility study to project the attendance, revenue, and expenses that would be associated with the establishment of a Vietnam War Museum. And staff is available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I'd like to make some comments. Some of the things that were said this evening about museums, and it should be private money. I have every intention of thinking that the city of Garden Grove would only be used as as a starter boost, priming the pump. If anything else, I think is a term that you could use. I really think it should be paid for with private monies and donations coming from the outside, and I think that there's a lot of different ways to make that happen. I would also like to point out that a good majority of the great museums in the United States are government funded from beginning to end. I don't know if anybody's ever been to the Railroad Museum in Sacramento, totally paid for with taxpayers' money. I'm not sure that, I mean, it's a fantastic museum, and if I had a choice to vote or vote against it paying for it, I think I would vote for it to pay for it. However, I can understand people not wanting to pay for those type of things. But the Smithsonian in the greatest museum in the world never would have happened without government funding. It started out as an exploratory trip during the Jefferson presidential time, and they sent a number of about 5 or 6 ships to explore the South Pole. And they never really got to the South Pole, but they did come up with thousands of specimens that they didn't know what to do with. And that's how the Smithsonian Museum got started. It was all government funded. I think that we're talking about doing a feasibility study here to take a look at it. I think it could do some really great things for the city of Garden Grove. I think this is a great place to have it. And it would be a museum, not a memorial. I heard somebody mention it as a memorial. We're not putting up a memorial. We're putting up a museum. We're putting up a history situation. The Richard Nixon Museum in Yorba Linda. Now, that was the reverse. That was paid for by individuals that wanted to do it. Now it's been turned over to the federal government. But it will be no matter what your party line is or anything else, it's a great place to go and see what happened during that period of time. I mean, I've been there a number of times, and it's not my political party that he was in, but I just think that we could have a great museum here. I think it would help fill our hotel rooms, which, if nothing else, is a great thing for the city of Garden Grove, and those things that go on. So I would like to hope that we could pass on okaying to do a feasibility study. I'd like to make a comment about something somebody else made today, that Matthew Fertel has the right to do that. He does. There's this, I don't know, what is your limit, Matt, that you can spend? $25,000. But I think it would be wrong on my part or any other city councilman's part to push their own little pet project and then slip it through by having Matt pay for it. And so it was never anybody's intention to have Matt pay for it, and it was sort of, I mean, wasn't even, the thought never even quite, I didn't think about it. I mean, this council has a right to vote on many, many things, and sometimes I do believe that there's certain things that slip through on the list every time that maybe 1 or 2 of them should have come before the council. So I think that all of this museum stuff should come before the council. I think everybody should have a say in it. But tonight we're recommending that we okay a feasibility study. We're recommending that we do an exploratory committee, and we actually have 2 candidates that we'd like to put on that committee, and I'd like to read a little bit about them. Peter Katz, he spoke this evening. Garden Grove resident since 1971, served in the United States Army from 1966 to 1969. While at Fort Stewart, he was responsible for processing helicopter pilots who were going to Vietnam, and was part of the burial escort for soldiers killed during the war. Not a good job at all. He spent time in both Vietnam and the DMZ and South Korea, predominantly as a finance corporal. He has graduated the Finance Academy from the Fort Benning Harrison in Indiana and the NCO Academy from Fort McClellan. He also holds a bachelor's degree in U.S. history, and he's retired from the United States Post Office. So anyway, he would certainly like to have Peter Katz added to the committee. The second nominee is really a fun guy, and I hope everybody gets to know him if this all happens, and that's General Bailey McCune. General McCune has a long and decorated service fighting for this country. Dedicated service fighting for this country. General McCune was a member of the National Guard and was stationed in Japan, where he was part of an infantry division that fought in the front lines during Korean War. He was actually a platoon leader in the United States Army. Probably one of the toughest jobs that you can possibly have, certainly as a beginning, is a platoon leader, because of all the officers, more platoon leaders are killed in action than anybody else. Where was I here? He later transferred to the United States Army Reserves and received his doctorate in psychology, where he practiced as part of the Surgeon General's office for the United States Army. He rose to the ranks as a lieutenant general with the National Guard and ultimately a general for the Department of Mental Health and Human Development. Additionally, General McCune was appointed as commander of the Vietnamese Imperial Order of the Dragon of Aman and has served as a personal representative to state world leaders in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Burma. And this guy he called us. He read about us in the newspaper and wanted to be part of this. And we interviewed him. I just didn't, and what a fun guy he is. He's got all kinds of great ideas for doing this. And then the good part about it is he has funding ideas, which really lit a light with me, because that's one of the things that we're going to have to do once we get this started, is seek outside funds. Anyway, so do we have 3 motions? Is that what we need here tonight, or?
Can I?
Go ahead, Mr.
Sure.
The third position that needs to be filled, will you two pick that person, or how does that work?
We, you, him, he, and her, and myself pick them. All we do is present them to you, and you're going to vote on. You can vote on them or whatever. I'm not trying to hide anything and keep anything hidden from anybody. We haven't got a third candidate yet.
Okay, and what's the process that people can express interest so that they can be considered?
Or they could write letters to us, or knock on our door, come and see us. There's all kinds of things.
Okay, we need to publicize that. It's good that people know that they can express an interest and be considered. Because I know one gentleman came here and spoke.
When
Marine, Quang Pham. So I know he showed a lot of enthusiasm about the project as well. So I'm very supportive of this idea. I do have some questions that some people have touched on, public speakers, on the public funds, but it's a small sum, so I can set it aside, that concern, and so that we can move ahead unanimously. So
sounds good to me.
So I move the item.
Okay, now what exactly?
Well, before
Go ahead.
we vote, I just want to make a little comments with regards to that. Garden Grove has its strength in diversity and being within walking distance from Disneyland. And because of that, the council before this one and this council has taken advantage of that, and they form a project called International West to attract tourists. And I see this Vietnam War Museum as another project that is within the International West purpose. And we should explore this to enhance the strength of this city, and that is tourism. We should strive to grow and develop in these trying times because of all the competitions and because of all the challenges that we're facing with the economic crisis. Secondly, I see the museum as also an educational center, being personally a witness of all the tragedies of war. I think that our young people should be educated to know that war is devastating and destructive to humankind, and also that it would slow down the growth of America and our economy, as we have seen recently and in the past in the Middle East that we're being involved with. And thirdly, the museum is, if it's to become a reality, it will tell the tales of Americans who have sacrificed their lives for the U.S. to uphold the integrity of the greatest nation in the world. The reason why we're the greatest nation in the world is because we know what it means to have freedom, and we want to be the leader in that. And to have the museum would pretty much tell the world that we are the leaders, and we are willing to sacrifice our own sons in order to protect that freedom. And to not forget that our own founding fathers saw that, and they sacrificed everything in order to make up this nation. So today, I see this nominal amount for a project this big, and which could bring revenue to the city, as something that is a small sacrifice that will teach others to uphold freedom, and as well as to bring benefit to the city. So I support the project.
You know, I was just thinking while you were talking, and actually while Mr. Broadwater was talking too, a lot of people didn't understand or didn't know what happened with Hitler and the Nazis and all that until somebody, I think Simon Wiesenthal or whoever, came up with the idea of a Museum of Tolerance and taught people things, the atrocities of war, but things that people either forgot, wanted to forget, or never heard about to begin with. And as generations come along, there are people, I mean, that's so removed. You have to have something, I think, that reminds people, that brings them back to see, you know, what has happened, what is our history. And again, I think Garden Grove is a place that, you know, we are very diverse, and that's one of the things we pride ourselves on. And while if you saw any squabbling at all, not today, but up here, it's because I think everybody wants to be a part of something like that. Because you can see the benefits to it, recording what happened before so many of those things get lost. As older generations die, there's so many stories, so many incidents, so many things that are lost in that process. But I think this is something that not only, I mean, if you want to say, well, it could be a tourist attraction, well, that's true, but I think a lot of it would bring people to it because they were there, they fought there, their parents fought there, they want to know a little bit more about it, and the people whose families were lost. And I think that spending $25,000 preliminarily is certainly something that I would support.
Mr. Broadwater, I think we can handle all actions under one motion.
Okay.
Okay, what's your motion?
Well, I move that we move forward with the feasibility study. I move that we create the committee, exploratory committee, and certainly I move that we accept these two gentlemen on that exploratory committee.
I'll second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, ordinance presented for second reading.
Mr. Mayor, 10A is ordinance number 2762 for second reading. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove, California, amending the redevelopment plan for the Buena Clinton redevelopment project under Senate Bill 1045 pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 33333.6E2C.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion is second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Next.
10B is ordinance number 2763 for second reading. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove, California, amending the redevelopment plan for the Buena Clinton project as authorized by Senate Bill 1096 pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 33333.6E2DI.
Move the item.
Second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
10C.
10C is ordinance number 2764 for second reading. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove, California, amending the redevelopment plan for the Garden Grove Community Project as authorized by Senate Bill 1045 pursuant to Health and Safety Code Sections 33333.2C and 33333.6E2C.
Move the item.
Okay, a motion.
Second.
Second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
10D.
10D is ordinance number 2765 for second reading, and that's ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove, California, amending the redevelopment plan for the Garden Grove Community Project as authorized by Senate Bill 1096 pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 33333.6E2DI as to the original area and to the 1974 area.
Move to approve.
Second.
Yeah, motion is second. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Broadwater. Motion received, 5 yes votes.
10D.
10E is ordinance number 2766 for second reading, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Garden Grove, California, amending the redevelopment plan for the Garden Grove Community Project as authorized by Senate Bill 1096 pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 33333.6E2DI as to the Trask Avenue 1976 Amendment area, Brooker's Chapman area, Brooker's Catella area, and the 1979 Amendment area.
Move the item.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Call for the vote.
Motion received, 5 yes votes.
Okay, matters from mayor, city council members of Mr. Broadwater.
Well, I certainly want to be thankful for the rain that we've been getting, and maybe it gets you a little wet, but it's certainly good to have. And I hope a little bit more of it keeps coming. I understand the storm tonight just a blowover, so it's probably gone by now. But it's good to have it. And as tough as things are in our economy and everything else, we still live in the greatest nation in the world, and we're probably more people are beating down the fences to get into this country than anybody's trying to get out of it. And we still live in a wonderful place, and we certainly need to be appreciative of it. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Wynn.
Just when I thought I was saying once too many times for buying in Garden Grove, residents came up to me and said that, your message on Channel 3, because of that, I buy in Garden Grove, and my husband buy in Garden Grove, and my kids buy in Garden Grove, and I hope you keep saying it so the other residents will buy in Garden Grove too. So here I am again. Remember to buy in Garden Grove so we can benefit from the revenues. Also want to thank all the council members for supporting the Vietnam War Museum ad hoc committee exploratory project, and for staff for doing the research and making the recommendation. We have a very fun February coming up. We have Valentine's, and also around Valentine's we have the Lunar New Year, and every Lunar New Year we have the Tet Festival in the city of Garden Grove at Garden Grove Park, and the Vietnamese Student Union puts that on every year, and they donate to approximately 10 different nonprofit organizations in the city of Garden Grove, and one of them is the Garden Grove Foundation. So please come and support them on February 12th, 13th, and 14th of next month. It's very diversified. You will find lots of foods and activities there, as well as entertainment. And also in the city of Westminster, I'm advertising for Westminster just a few seconds only, because council members will be participating in that. We'll probably be on our fire truck like every year, and that's on Saturday, February 13th at around 9 a.m.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thanks. Just want to give a quick report on a committee I'm involved in, is the State Housing, Community, and Economic Development Policy Steering Committee. It's part of the League of California Cities. And we meet quarterly and discuss different issues with state representatives as they pertain to the city. Once again, the kind of time and time again mantra is local control. Is what we push for. So, especially with everything going on with the state budget, there's been, the state has been looking desperately for ways to balance their budget, and we're just trying to protect city interests and make sure that they don't do so on the backs of or on the shoulders of all the cities throughout the state. So, there's been attempts to take redevelopment funds, to take transit funds, to take gas tax back, a lot of different things, and just a whole lot of other weird items that, like trying to regulate rent control and mobile home parks and things like that, which, we really feel should not be state mandated issues. They should be local issues that we can choose to adopt or not adopt as we see fit. So anyways, just plugging forward with that group, and I think it was a productive meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Dell.
Thank you. We had the wettest 7-day stretch of rain in 50 years, over 7 inches of rain, and that's when I really appreciate the work of our city staff, Mr. Keith Jones and the Public Works Department. In that kind of situation, no news is good news, right? And we didn't get people knocking down our doors trying to complain about being flooded out of their homes or their driveways. So, Mr. Patel, your staff doing a good job, and you. And I think the people of the city really appreciate the good work, especially in times like that. And I know I do, not just at the city here, but also with the county. You notice how we haven't heard about any major flooding, flash flooding, or landslide or mudslide, and it's all because of proper preparation, of adequate planning. And this is where good staffing really makes our job easier up here. because we could be putting out fires, in an emergency session up here with all the rain we have had. So thank you to the city staff, and I'm glad we survived that big storm. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to also thank the city staff because, well, one of the things that was brought up earlier about the $25,000 limit that Mr. Fertel can engage in contracts or whatever, that's done for a reason. I mean, because otherwise, every time something came up, we'd have to be calling council meetings. And sometimes you have to act very quickly. And I think he's been a good steward of our money, and he's done a good job, and he's very selective. And Mr. Jones, for this city, I can remember years ago driving a patrol car, and I thought I was in a boat because the streets were so flooded. I mean, any of your major streets flooded. You really don't see that anymore. When you have that much rain coming at one time, it can happen. But the drainage system, everything has been upgraded and done so much better, you almost never have those instances, even though you have that pounding rain. They've done a great job. And again, I talked about this a few weeks ago. These are some of the things that most people don't think about. We spend a lot of money on infrastructure because we don't want those terrible incidents to occur. And you can see that it pays off when you drive out of Garden Grove into Santa Ana or Westminster or some of the other cities and you feel like you're floating. They probably wish they had our staff because they do a good job. And they don't just do it, when it's raining. I mean, this is done all year round, and it's done at times that are most beneficial for the work, for the streets being worked on and all that. So even though you might occasionally have to drive around barricades, the work's being done, and it really pays off when you do have situations like we've had all those days of rain, and it was terrible. We have a little bit of rain. I don't know if it's raining outside now, but if it is, drive safely and stay dry. And I'm going to adjourn this meeting till the next meeting, Tuesday, February 9th, 2010 at 5:30 p.m. here in this building. Thank you.